Greetings, LEGO fans, and here is your periodic reminder that I am indeed a person with a face. Well, here we are. We've hit 10,000 subscribers on the channel, and I cannot believe we've come this far in such a short amount of time. There's no way I could do any of this without the support and enthusiasm of each and every one of you. So I thought it was high time I answered some more of your questions. RC Crawlers asks, are you into other hobbies other than collecting LEGO? Well, as I mentioned in my 1,000 subscriber special, one of my favorite things to do is musical theater. And because I'm lucky enough to live in an area where professional productions are always going on, I've been able to do a lot of theater and earn some good income on the side. I cannot walk away again. In addition to that, I'm also a pretty avid cyclist as well. Metal Lego Jeff asks, what was the first LEGO set you remember getting? It's interesting, as I grew up with two older brothers, and so remembering whose set was whose as a kid is kind of murky, but definitely the first set that I really remember making an impact on me is when I got Fort Legoretto for Christmas of 1996. Dawnbreaker Drake asks, what is your favorite LEGO space sub-theme? Those always seem to rotate around, but currently I'd have to say it's between Ice Planet 2002 and the original Blacktron. Next, they ask, if you could bring back a retired LEGO color, which one would it be? Trans Neon Orange, hands down. And last, he asks, Spyrius ranking when? Definitely working on that. Of course, the hardest part of this is always just being able to get my hands on the sets, but when I do, definitely planning on that. Slurms Mackenzie asks, what is your favorite set in your collection? Well, I've opined over and over again about how much I love Fort Legoretto, but I'll throw a different one out this time. I absolutely love the Titanic, all the detail that went into that. The Titanic movie came out when I was 7 years old, and ever since then, I've just been obsessed with Titanic. I was even in the musical a couple of years ago. It's proudly on display in my LEGO room right next to the replica blueprints that I used in the show when I played Thomas Andrews, the designer. Goodwin21 asks, with your focus on retro LEGO, is there anything that modern LEGO could learn from its past that it's not currently taking advantage of? The thing that immediately comes to mind for me is just the utter playability of LEGO, especially in the 80s and the 90s. Every set seemed to include some sort of charming, fun play feature, even if it was really simple. And I don't claim to be super tuned in to what the 4+ sets are doing now, but it just feels like there was more of that in the past. I also loved the alternate builds that appeared on the box art and on the instructions, and I wish that that's something that they focused more on as well. I suppose it's just the emphasis on creativity and expansion beyond what the instructions say. Riley Woodbeck asks, will you be covering Alpha Team at some point? Would love to see a video about those sets. I love Alpha Team, especially that first wave. They came at the perfect time for me, and I definitely want to do an episode of Retro LEGO covering them. Motor Sagmanon asks, what LEGO theme has been better or worse than you expected before going into it fully to review it? For better, I would definitely say M-Tron, because it's definitely the series that I knew the least about before going into, and I ended up really loving it, particularly the Particle Ionizer and the Mega Core Magnetizer. Those are two A+ sets. On the worse side of it, I would maybe have to say Time Cruisers, though I still love the theme. Going through each set one by one did make me realize that my nostalgia definitely plays a big role in how much I love that theme. Their next question is, if you had infinite space and money, what type of LEGO display would you want to make first? I don't know if any of you played the 2004 game Sid Meier's Pirates. It basically takes place in this sprawling overhead view of the Caribbean, and you can do all sorts of piratey things. I would love to create just a massive diorama with islands and ports and all sorts of pirate ships and imperial ships. That would be my dream. AWOL Bricks asks, which LEGO theme you've explored so far is the one you've learned the most about by doing the retrospect? M-Tron, of course, would fall under that category, but also Ice Planet 2002. I grew up with a lot of the pieces in my LEGO bin growing up, but I didn't really know much about the sets themselves because they were all deconstructed by the time I was able to play with the pieces. So being able to learn about Ice Planet and all those great sets was an awesome opportunity. Brian asks, for space, castle, and other themes, what are your respective favorite and least favorite factions? I mentioned my favorites for space, but probably my least favorite for space would be insectoids. It's just not really one that I ever connected with much, though I'm open to having my mind changed when I do the episode of Retro Lego on them in the future. For castle, I don't really think there's a faction I don't like, but perhaps a surprising favorite of mine was Fright Nights from 1996 or 7. I think those just hit at the perfect time in my childhood, and the kind of spooky overtones were really appealing to me. Blue Dragon Bricks asks, what LEGO castle set is your favorite? I'd have to say hands down it's the Royal Knights Castle. That one just, in my opinion, can't be beat. They also ask, if you could do a retro LEGO video on a castle theme, which castle era would you pick? Well, I do plan to cover every castle theme eventually in the future, but the thing I'm most excited about is that very early era, like with the Yellow Castle. Chatterblocks asks, what other LEGO YouTubers do you like or are inspired by? Well, this probably comes as a surprise to no one, but RR Slugger was definitely a really big inspiration for me. And Trick Bricks, who recently returned to YouTube after a 5-year hiatus, is back at it, and you should go subscribe to both of those channels right now. As far as new set reviews go, I like Tiago Catarino because he has a lot of experience from working at LEGO, and he gives such good, concise feedback on the sets. Legion of Fett asks, if you could pick one retro LEGO set to be remade, like the Galaxy Explorer or Lion Knight's Castle, which set would you pick? That is a tricky question because there's so many that I'd love a remake of. Of course, it should come as no surprise that I would love a modern remake of Fort Legoretto, like unto the El Dorado Fortress from a couple years ago. I would also like to see a full revival of the Adventurer series because I think there's so much more storytelling potential there. Just make sure Johnny Thunder has his trademark slouch hat and not a fedora. J4ROD asks, which licensed theme replacing original themes has been the worst? I think it's got to be Indiana Jones replacing Adventurers. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the Indiana Jones sets, but the fact that it killed the Adventures line essentially is a bit of a black mark on its record. Cubovoid Studios asks, what is the current value of your entire LEGO collection? It's not really something I've tried really hard to quantify, but just looking around, I would guess it's in the ballpark of $5,000 to $6,000. They also simply ask, room tour? Well, don't mind if I do. I'll just go over the things that have changed since my last tour. You can check out my most recent update of the subway to see what all went into that. But also, I've been expanding my storage because obviously that's been needed. These shoe boxes that came from Costco are actually a great option because not only do they store things, but they basically look like display cases, so that's been really helpful to have. And Winter Village found its way back on the upper shelves here, this time above the city. The general store, because of its size, had to have a special shelf built for it, which perfectly fits it on there, right next to all the other Western sets. And the Bandit's wheel gun that I recently opened brand new sits right next to the general store. Also, I do like to rotate my displays. Star Wars used to be prominently featured here, but now it's a display for Adventurer's Jungle, which has all the sets here, and the blimp, which looks beautiful flying next to it all there. And of course, there's still a nice Star Wars space battle going on over here. Time Cruisers always feels a little homeless, but currently it's over here right next to the Harry Potter display. And that's all that's changed since our last update. Not quite as big of a change as we've had in previous videos, but things continue to evolve. Peanut Man asks, will you do a video on Space Police 2? Well, I'd have to get my hands on the sets first. Tim Watkins asks, if you had to pick one LEGO theme and sub-theme from the pre-franchise days, what would it be? I would definitely pick the cowboy sub-theme of the Western line. The Cheese Lord asks, what is your favorite LEGO brick? This may be the most basic answer in the world, but honestly, it's got to be the 2x4 brick. It's iconic. Gray Fox asks, if you won the lottery so money was no object, what's the first current LEGO set you're buying and the first retro or vintage set? As far as modern LEGO goes, I would probably spring for Rivendell because that's one of the most beautiful sets I've ever seen. I've just been stopped by the price. And as far as retro LEGO goes, I would probably spring for the monorail from either Futron or Unitron. Gold Saber asks, what do you notice about how the instruction booklets have changed over the decades? Well, having built a lot of retro Lego sets recently, the thing I can say is that modern booklets are much easier to follow. Often in those old instruction booklets, there's very little rhyme or reason to what pieces get put on, and it can be very easy to miss a step if you're not careful. Today, they definitely hold your hand quite a bit more, which can be seen as a positive or a negative depending on who you are. Next, as I previously mentioned, there were always alternate builds in the old booklets, and I loved that, and that's something they should definitely bring back. And I've heard that they have in certain themes, but it's not something I've seen personally. Admiral Yularen asks, what's your White Whale or Holy Grail set? I'll name just a few. As previously mentioned, the monorails from Unitron and Futron, but I'd also say the Metro Liner, the Black Seas Barracuda, and a much more recent one, the Disneyland Train Station and Train. Their next question is, what's your favorite all-time set? Can you guess? Moon Moon asks, how are you? Pretty good. And do you like wolves? Yes. Catharsis Catalyst asks, do you have any sets that you would classify as perfect or near perfection? There are actually quite a few sets I would put in this category, but the one I want to highlight here is the Pharaoh's Forbidden Ruins from the Adventurer's Desert subtheme. I don't know if there's a single set that packs more play potential than this one. You've got a ground vehicle, an aerial vehicle, heroes, villains, supernatural elements, a huge interior, and a beautiful facade. I mean, what more could you want in a Lego set? Red Squirrel asks, did you ever play any of the pre-TT Lego games back in the late 90s and early 2000s? There was really only one that I played, and it's the original Lego Island, and I played that game for hours on end, for years. I'm actually working on getting a copy of this up and running so that I can do a special episode of Retro Lego on this landmark game. The nostalgia hits particularly hard with this one. Their next question is there a Lego theme that you wonder what it could have been if it had had another year or two's worth of sets? They mentioned Rock Raiders here, which I absolutely agree with. I loved that series, and it was definitely cut off too soon. I, of course, would love to have seen more Western sets, but that's a given at this point. I also think that Time Cruisers really could have come into its own if it had been given just a little more time to develop. Igor Kavansky asks, are you interested in any Lego themes you haven't covered yet? I would love to see your take on superheroes or Lord of the Rings. It's actually my goal on this channel to eventually cover every single Lego theme from the past. Now that's a lofty goal, but there's plenty of time to do it. And both of the themes mentioned here are things that I would love to cover. Brody Bricks asks, what is your favorite adventurer set from each sub-theme? Well, if you want the answer for Desert and Jungle, go ahead and check out my Retro Lego episodes on those. Dino Island and Orient Expedition are coming very soon, so I don't know if I want to spoil that here. 15th Apollo asks, how soon do you plan to remove that foosball table to replace it with a gigantic table full of Lego, as your Lego room so rightly deserves? Well, that's definitely something that's being talked about. Its days are numbered. Lucas Van Dyke asks, what's the most expensive minifigure you have? I'm pretty sure it's this guy, Ah Chu from the Adventurer's Jungle line. He tends to sell between 40 and 50 bucks used on Bricklink. And I've got two of him. Lano La Cola asks, what was the design process to create your minifigure form? I wish I could say there was an actual design process to it, but my wife, daughter, and I were making a fun end-of-the-year recap video, and we just went to Bricks and Minifigs and just picked out some parts that looked like us. And that original design is what stuck. Pro Bro Bricks asks, can you give me some tips and tricks? Now, full disclosure, I work full-time as a videographer, but I can tell you that all of the skills that I learned for that job, I learned on YouTube, and so can you. So if you want to start a YouTube channel, just start, and there's plenty of resources to guide you along the way. One channel that I leaned on heavily when I was learning videography was Film Riot. They have so many great DIY tutorials and so much information that can help you. Damien Charno asks, can this be the last question? Yes. Well, that does it for this 10,000 subscriber Q&A. Thank you again for all of your support, and until next time, keep building.